All right, so far we have gone and we've solved all of these equations for x or whatever our variable was, but there could be a time where you solve for x and the answer would not actually work. It wouldn't make any sense. That case happens when you divide by 0. So let's just talk about dividing by 0. If you had 0 things and you wanted to split nothing into 5 groups, you could split nothing into 5 groups. All of the groups would have nothing. So 0 divided by 5 would just be 0. However, if you had 5 things to begin with, so if you had like 5 apples, and you said, hey, I want to split these 5 apples up into 0 groups. So 5 apples, don't split them up at all. I want to split them up into 0 groups. You can't actually do that because the group of 5 apples in and of itself is already one group. So 5 divided by 0 will not work. In fact, if you can divide by 0, if you ever find a way to divide by 0, I want you to raise your hand. Let me know. I'm going to take shelter. The world is going to implode. It is impossible to divide by 0. If you even test it out on your calculator, 5 divided by 0, you get that error message because it's undefined. And you should remember the word undefined when you talk about slope, right? If it was a vertical line, the slope was undefined. So if you're dividing by 0, it is undefined. It will not work. When we get these numbers that make our denominator equal 0, this is only for the denominator. This is the only thing down here that cannot equal 0. It's called an extraneous solution. Extraneous just means extra. Okay? So all we need to do is look at our denominators and ask ourselves, when does the denominator equal 0? So I sit here and I say, hey self, when does x plus 3 equal 0? Well, I know that x plus 3 equals 0 when x equals negative 3. And then I ask, when does 2x equal 0? And in this case, x would equal 0 if x would equal 0, yeah, if x equaled 0. So our extraneous solutions are x is negative 3 and x equals 0. So these are extraneous. The question also wants you to say which ones are solutions and which ones are not solutions. So all you have to do is just take these numbers and substitute them in. So if I said, for example, x equals 3, 4 over 3 plus 3, because I'm going to use this 3, is 6. Is that equal to 2 over 2 times 3? Well, 2 times 3 is 6. So is 4, 6 equal to 2, 6? No. So this is not a solution. If I went in here and used 1, as my value, I would get 4 and 2. Well, that makes sense. So this is a solution. And I also have to test out negative 1. So 4 over negative 1 plus 3 is positive 2. But 2 over negative 2 does not equal the same thing. So this is not a solution. So your only solution is x equals 1. Okay? If you would have cross multiplied, you would have just seen that right away, right? 4 times x would be 8x. And 2 times x and 2 times 3. Subtract the 2x, so you get 6x equals 6, x equals 1. So there's multiple ways to do this. If you have the answers, you can just take them and substitute them in and evaluate them. If not, you can cross multiply. Okay? All we're going to do right now is just figure out if we have extraneous solutions and what they are. So in order to do this, you don't even need to look at the numerators. Okay? You just need to look at the denominators. When you're looking at the denominators, you must factor down to lowest terms. So the first thing I'm going to do is recognize that this has to be factored into 2 over x plus 1, x minus 1. And now you'll notice that all the denominators are the same. So I don't need to test this out 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I just need to test it out for every different denominator. So I say, when does x plus 1 equal 0? And when does x minus 1 equal 0? Well, x plus 1 equals 0 when x equals negative 1. This has to be when x equals positive 1. So your extraneous solutions would be negative 1, 1. And we will talk about why these are extraneous. We'll look at graphs of why this does not work. But for right now, let's just practice on solving for these extraneous solutions. Again, this one, I know this has to be factored. Technically, this could be factored, okay? But I just want to check for extraneous solutions right now. So I'm just going to factor negative x squared minus 3x, leave that alone for right now. And I'm going to factor this as x and x, 3 and 1, positive 3, negative 1. Okay, again, these are all the same factors, so you just have to solve it two times. When does x plus 3 equal 0? When does x minus 1 equal 0? Well, the extraneous solutions are x equals negative 3 and x equals 1. Okay? For the bottom, what I want you guys to do is to solve these problems, list out all of the extraneous solutions. So I will solve number 1 with you, and then you guys can work on the rest of these and then answer them on the computer. Number 1, you only need to worry about the extraneous solutions when you have a variable. Okay, so x plus 1 is the only thing I need to test out. When does x plus 1 equal 0? When x equals negative 1. And then I just keep this here because if my answer is negative 1, the problem doesn't actually work. Okay. Now for this one, I need to look at my common denominators. Okay, I can't use cross multiplication. Well, I guess I could if I moved the 9/10 over. So actually I'll show you guys how to do this one two different ways. The first way is to take the 9/10 and to subtract it from 2/5. You could do this very easily because they're all numbers. There are no variables. So if I subtract this, let me rewrite this first. I'd have to make a common denominator of 10, so I'd have to multiply this 5 times 2 and the 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4/10 and minus 9/10. So 2 over x plus 1 would equal negative 5/10. Cross multiply, 2 times 10 is 20. Cross multiply negative 5x. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 5. Add 5 to both sides, positive 25. That equals negative 5x, so x has to equal negative 5. Okay, so go ahead, you're going to finish the rest of these problems. Please do them on the paper. You're going to put the answers on the computer, but I want you guys to get used to factoring everything, figuring out what your LCD is, using the extraneous solutions, and then you can put your answers in on the computer.